All right, welcome to the Harryman Show. We have a great one. We have the tremendously talented Brendan Buckley. Brendan he's played in some world-class acts such as Shakira, Farrell, and Tegan And Sara, and many more that we will talk about. How you doing, Brendan?
I'm doing well. How about yourself?
I'm great, man. It's just not to fanboy on you too much. I mean, I've been reading articles on you since I was a child, pretty much, in Modern Drummer, and looking at your setups and your versatile styles, and I'm like, I actually get to talk to this guy. This is awesome.
Well, I guess that's the beauty of the drum community.
Yeah.
I think drummers like other drummers, and drummers like hanging out with other drummers and chatting with other drummers. So all it takes is for one guy to say to another guy, "You play drums too," and then and then everything is all running on all cylinders.
Yeah, you like someone like you is always open minded and learning. You really have to have that attitude that will kind of land you in better positions throughout life.
Mm. Yeah. Anytime I bump into anyone who says they play drums, and I don't know that means they play professionally or they played when they were, 14 years old, whatever. But it's like I immediately strike up a conversation like, "Do you still have a kit? What kind of kit do you have?"
Yeah.
"Oh, a Tama Rockstar. Cool. What color?" And it's like, it's always fine. It's always fine to talk about drums with anyone at any level because drums are great.
Yeah, I mean, it's a healthy thing. It's the mental thing. I mean, it's just like you said, all around 100% positive. I never had a bad conversation with anybody about drums. So, I want to talk about what you're currently doing. Who are you currently playing with?
This week I'm playing with Farrell.
Okay.
Yeah, we're doing some rehearsals for some upcoming like streaming events and things like that. I guess that's what most stars do right now is they do streaming events.
Nice.
So yeah.
And how long have you been with Perry?
It's been, I guess, about 2 years. About 2 years. Yeah, almost 2 years. Now, he released a solo record in 2019, and I did a tour with him. We did Europe and the U.S. and a bunch of festivals. And then we were supposed to do a South America tour and another U.S. tour in 2020, but that got all pushed back into the indefinite future.
Okay, and I know Perry has an extensive catalog. Do you guys touch base on any of the Jane songs at all?
Yeah, fortunately we do. Because
Awesome.
we learned in rehearsals, we learned his whole new record, which was fun, great songs. And then he starts peppering it in with some older songs, like a few Porno Papyrus songs, a few Jane's Addiction songs, a few covers that he wants, and then just builds the set list from there. Mm-hmm. And then kind of comes up with a set list per show, a mixture of, old songs, new songs, cover songs, whatever. And it's different from day to day. So it's fun. It's fun for everyone in the band to have like a larger pool of tunes to draw from. But speaking of the Jane songs, like I'm a huge Stephen Perkins fan, so it's a blast. I mean, I already knew the songs, but then to learn them note for note,
yeah,
and then also for him to say, "Feel free to not play it anything like the originals. I really would like it to just sound new and fresh," which is a challenge for me because I kind of want to play it like the original. But he's like, "Yeah, I don't mind if you do it totally different." I'm like, "All right." So you got to have to kind of balance that that decision of should I honor the original parts or should I do what the singer asked me, which is try to change it up a bit,
Yeah, and that's hard when you think about a song like the Mountain Song. You know what I mean? It has a very distinct tribal pattern, and you really have to kind of stay true to the element of that song, but then put some spice on top of it.
Yeah, and that's part of how I got the gig was I did an audition, and he asked, "Can we do Mountain Song?" I'm like, "Sure." And we did Mountain Song once. It says, sounded perfect. Now, what would it sound like if we swung it? I'm like, okay. And then we did that. He goes, well, what would it sound like if we did a jazz version? What would it sound like if we did a Latin version? What would it sound like if we did an R&B version? Or how about like Stax or Motown? And he kept on like throwing these terms out, and we would do different versions. And he's like, I love it. You're the guy because you're willing to go down this weird creative hole with me. Some other people might not want to do that. So I was down to try all these different versions.
Oh, that's great. And then, as you're well known for your Shakira gig, how long were you playing with her?
I started with Shakira in 1998.
Oh, wow.
It feels like a billion years ago, but it was only, 23 now? Yeah.
Oh, wow. And how did you come across meeting her in that opportunity?
That came because I used to live in Miami, and while living in Miami, I worked at a bunch of different tiny and big studios, recording drums or percussion for different producers.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the producers who worked at Gloria Estefan's studio, he contacted me saying, there's this South American artist coming in next week. Would you be able to play some drums on her record? I'm like, absolutely. And I didn't know who it was at the time. He just said, come bring your drums over. We'll do one song a day or something.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. And the first song I did was kind of an audition, but also wound up making it to her record. And it was Shakira. And then I came back the next day, and the next day we did half the record that way. And yeah, and then it all picked up from there.
Yeah, so
she did an MTV Unplugged, and I was part of that band. And then she did a promo tour. I was part of that band, and I kind of worked on all of her tours or albums ever since.
Yeah, and then the cool thing about that is you actually came up with her, so you actually kind of grew her career with her as well too.
Yeah, I mean, she was already by 1997. She was already a big star in like Colombia, Brazil, Puerto Rico, Mexico, but the album that I worked on was much bigger because that's when Sony and they really started pushing it hard. And then the follow-up record in 2001 was the one where she started singing in English. So we started doing a lot more of the U.S. and Europe.
Mm-hmm.
And then after that, we started doing more Asia and Africa. And she turned herself from a Latina artist into a world artist, which allowed her to, play to a lot more markets.
And I noticed, were you bringing percussion into the Shakira act right away, or did you guys have a percussionist from day one as well?
Let me think. It was kind of a mixture. Like, I've always played drums and percussion. I mean, it's what I studied at college. And so I was always thinking, like, if I don't play a rock beat on this, maybe I could play this instead, or maybe I could play that.
Mm-hmm.
But I think, probably from the beginning, we always had a percussionist live.
Nice.
It's only this recent tour we did in 2018 where we didn't have a secondary percussionist. That was the first big tour we did without an extra percussionist.
And that's what I want to bring up because I've been kind of watching, I believe it's the 2018 videos you have up. You have quite an extensive setup there. And I noticed you're playing a lot of percussion on a pad and that's integrated into your drum set. Was that something you're familiar with, or was that kind of a fun element to all kind of wrap into one?
Well, that also was something that was both. I was familiar with electronics, but that gig encouraged me to get more and more into it because, I mean, I've been using electronics since I started, playing drums. I had a drum machine, and I got a drum cat back in the day, and I got something called a Alesis D4, which is an old trigger module.
I had one.
So I've had I've had all these things and messing around with that stuff. I had a computer sequencer a long time ago, but I'd always throw it in and throw loops into any kind of little rock band or pop group I was playing in at the time. I remember when I started playing with this artist named Julio Iglesias, that was heavily electronic and acoustic hybrid. There was a lot of drum cat parts around a big drum set. But the Shakira gig started out as kind of a rock pop band. I just played a 4-piece kit and just played like a rock drummer. She was into Zeppelin and Blur and Oasis and Sheryl Crow and all these things. So there's no real need to play electronics at that time.
Nice.
But then with each tour after that, each album, she wanted to add more dance elements, more R&B, more bringing more electronic drums into the kit. For a while, it was more separate. Like I'd either play an acoustic drum set on this song, or I'd swing like 90 degrees to the left and play an electronic drum set on the next song.
Nice.
And then I found it easier to actually just integrate them into the same drum set. And that allowed me to play like an acoustic kick and a synth pad for the snare, or vice versa. I could play an electric kick, but play a real snare and hi-hat, and I can mix it up depending on the song. And that really worked well. And she loved it. The musical director loved it. And it kind of went from there.
And that's awesome. And this is more of a gear gig question, but I noticed you ran two MacBooks on your left. Are they both one running tracks and one running loops for you simultaneously?
You would think, but there are 4 laptops. There are 2 running software samplers, and there are 2 that are running tracks that are off to the side of the stage.
Oh, nice.
So I used to control all of them. Mm-hmm. It was I had a little MIDI controller that would control the sequences, and then I would have my software samples on another thing. But now there's a dedicated guy who runs all the tracks, and it makes my life a lot easier.
Yeah, well, obviously you're a pro at doing that. At first going into that was kind of a little nerve-wracking with all the moving pieces.
It's not nerve-wracking because you spend enough time working on the choreography involved. Like I have to make sure I hit this button, push stop, do this, do that, and go bam on the snare drum in that order, and you just practice it till it's all coordination. Yeah. I know when to hit the pad. I know when to hit the crash. I know when to do all this. The thing that is, rather than being nerve-wracking, it's just sometimes, for lack of a better term, a pain in the ass. Like when something goes wrong, there's more things you have to check. Yeah. You know, if your hi-hat clutch starts to fall apart during a gig, you know how to fix your hi-hat clutch. I'm just going to spin this little screw and it's back to normal again. Yeah, but if stuff stops working for the electronics, you're like, where do I start? Is it the cable? Is it the software? Is there an update I need to get? And the more electronics you add, if you have triggers and laptops and sequencers and samplers, there's a lot of stuff to trouble check every time something goes wrong. And that's why it's awesome to have an extra guy or two on stage that are just dedicated to doing that stuff.
Yeah, and I should have redirected that question. I mean, there's no room for error is what I was trying to come out pretty much.
Yeah, I think the more you add electronics to your live show, the more problems you're adding. And adding electronics is fun, but you're also adding an extra level of problems and things to fix and things to troubleshoot. So when I'm on a tour and I'm playing acoustic drums and then someone says, maybe it'd be cool to add some, maybe some electronic samples to this tune. I'm like, okay, well, that's a whole other can of worms. I'm totally down to do it. But now we need more DIs. We need more inputs on the board. We need this. We need that, So it's always a little bit more involved than someone might think originally, but often it's worth it because then it adds these nice elements. So I'm used to it. I'm used to it the same way that if you were a keyboardist and you were just playing piano and someone said, wouldn't it be cool if you had an organ too? You're like, yeah, it would be cool. You want to rent an organ? Let's do that too. But I think that when you're playing drum set and someone says, could you play percussion too? You're like, sure, I can do that. And then if someone says, can you play drum set, percussion, and can you run electronics too? Sure, I can do that. But those are 3 different layers of elements of your job, and they each, take more troubleshooting when it comes to the rehearsals and sound checks.
Yeah, and as a huge compliment to you, you're one of the best players I've seen handle all that, to be honest with you.
No, thank you.
Yeah, and
it's just hours. It's not talent. Just the hours I've done it.
Well, it just I appreciate what you do. I have a lot to learn in that area, but we'll talk more about your gear setup. But I also want to bring up the Instagram videos and Facebook called The Drummer Plus Drummer. How did that come about?
Oh, well, thanks for noticing. That's fairly new. It was something that I've always loved, playing drums with other drummers, but only playing drums with other drummers who I think have big ears, great feel, very musical, know how to leave space. It's a fun thing for 2 drum set players to play together in that element. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of people get exposure either in a marching drum line of playing with other drummers or playing in an orchestra where you have like a whole 5 drummers in the pit all together playing in unison. Or even if you're in a Latin rhythm section where you got a timbale player, a conga player, a bongo player, you're all playing together, you get used to that. You're exposed to that. A rock drummer doesn't really get exposed to that very often. Unfortunately, he doesn't get to play with other percussive elements very often. Mm-hmm. So, and people aren't used to hearing it. People aren't used to seeing two drum sets playing together.
No, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
You developed tunnel vision pretty fast.
Yeah, and it's part of the job. I mean, if your job is to go and not listen to anyone else, and you do it really well, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that there's drummers who I see, and I'm like, man, I like the way that guy plays. I would love to jam with him someday.
Yeah.
You know, and I start thinking about this. I'm like, maybe I can just start doing a jam night that's not a big fusion band with 16 people, but just two drum sets in a bar. Mm-hmm. And you know, it'd be really fun. So I started thinking like of a wish list of drummers I'd like to do that with, either here in LA or some of my friends in New York or Portland or Nashville or London. I'm like, oh, I can do this, and maybe we can do it like once a month. Like, you know, the first Monday of every month, I'll get a buddy to come and we'll set up two drum sets and we'll play for an hour, and it'll be fun. Mm-hmm. And then that's exactly when COVID hit, and I'm like, well, I guess I'll wait another year or two. And then I thought, well, maybe I can. In the meantime, maybe I can do a virtual version of this that's just like a minute long of me kind of playing with someone that I would have asked anyway. Mm-hmm. And then I thought, oh, it'd be good. Maybe I can do it with someone I would have asked who's also really good at recording themselves. You know, someone that has a home studio that's got really great tones. Mm-hmm. So pretty much everyone, I've done 21 so far, 21 weeks, and pretty much everyone you see is a guy who not only do I like their drumming, but I like the way they sound in the studio and they can record themselves, and you know, it's fun. So that's basically what it is. I don't know where it's going, but it's been fun so far.
Well, please keep doing it because I'm enjoying it wholeheartedly.
I appreciate that.
I was recently just geeking out on the Todd Sucherman one, and I saw that. I was like, whoa. And, you know, I mean, the two of you together just had a really complimenting each other.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I've got another one with him because we did two. And I just didn't want to do them, back to back. But I'll drop another one in the next week or so.
Nice, and he has a notorious, famous drumming room, and everything sounds great in that room too, as well.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting because you know I love recording, I love engineering, and I've been basically recording myself playing the drums since high school. Mm-hmm. And then I realized that there's a slew of other drummers who are out there doing it also, and they all do it differently. Yeah. Because when you're recording yourself, you're kind of like a little mad scientist in your own room. Mm-hmm. So I do like some guys who have a billion mics, or some guys who have two mics, and some guys have a billion drums, and some guys use 4 drums, and some guys are very natural, like get really warm, natural sounds. Some guys have super affected, like lo-fi, you know, industrial sounds, and I love all that. Nice. And some drummers are really, really busy, but tastefully busy, and some guys are super spacious, and so I like that there's not a lot of words exchanged. I just contact someone and just say, you be you, and allow me to jam with you, and that's what I want. It's, you know, selfishly great for me too. So
yeah, and that's probably one of the only benefits of this pandemic, that everyone's kind of focused more on setting up their own home studio and getting stuff like that going.
That is true. I feel like I've been doing it for so long because it's kind of been a hobby of mine also. Uh-huh. Way before it was a profession. I just love recording. So I've had every version of a recording device, you know. Mm-hmm. But now it's becoming a little more of a necessity, both because of the quarantine shutdowns and also because of the state of the music industry and the way music creation is happening. More people are doing things electronically or virtually or on laptops. And they're saying, well, I could drag this GarageBand loop, or I can have my friends email me some drums, whatever's easier. Yeah. So if you make it super, super hard to record drums, they're just going to say, it's not worth it. I'm just going to drag this loop that's on my laptop. But if you're like, no, I can give you killer sounding drums that'll sound awesome on your song in no time. They're like, oh, that's better than me using a loop that doesn't really match my song, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the technology is definitely catching up with it too, opposed to what it was 20 or 30 years ago.
Mm-hmm. All right. And there's another cool thing to think about is that, you know, drums, there are some rules to what, you know, the ways to record things or ways to tune things, but really it's mostly subjective. Mm-hmm. So you can mess up and still get great sound. Yeah. you can not know what you're doing, and you can still record some great ideas. So I don't think people should be that afraid to work on recording themselves and learning from that because, yeah, the worst thing you're going to do is record some raunchy sounding beat that's still kind of cool.
Yeah.
Drums can sound good distorted. They can sound good clean. They can sound good laid back. They can sound good on top, it's all to taste. So if you're kind of digging the sounds, then you're off to a good start.
Well, I'm a little late to the party myself, but I actually just started diving into it in the last 6 months, and it's a rabbit hole. I mean, I'm having fun, just messing around with the stuff and learning. It's humbling, but yeah, I'm gonna keep doing it until I'm never really gonna be into it. But I kind of want to pull it back a little bit to your history. You graduated from the University of Miami. I want to ask, how long were you there, and what were the teachers that taught you the versatile styles you have?
Yeah, I went to University of Miami, the School of Music. I think it's now called Frost School of Music, but it's a great school. I went there for 4 years. I didn't plan on going there for 4 years necessarily, but yeah, I just did. I think my junior year, I was kind of thinking about leaving and moving to New York, and my teachers were like, you know what, you're almost done. Why don't you just stick it out a little longer? And it was actually wound up being great because I made a ton of musical connections my senior year, which I still use now. But that being said, my teachers I had drum set teachers. They were Stephen Rucker was the main guy. There was a jazz teacher named Stephen Bagby. He was fantastic. I had a couple other drum set teachers. Lou Abbott was one. And then I had a bunch of classical teachers there. Let me think. Keith Aleo, Scott Deal, Nay Rosario, Fred Wickstrom, Harry Hawthorne. Those were all my professors there, and there was a bunch of professors, and I would take marimba class, timpani class, world drumming, Brazilian percussion ensemble, and then bebop class, and then fusion ensemble. So they kind of like every semester you were just thrown a bunch of different styles to try to ingest.
Jeez. And then I imagine before that, coming to college, you kind of went up the ranks with school band and marching band, etc.
Yeah, I was kind of a late start in high school. I started picking up drums about the age of 14, but I had played piano and trumpet before that, so I can read and do all the basics when it came to playing in a band. But I was heavily into music, heavily into watching MTV and playing heavy metal and rock and stuff like that, and punk music. And then I was fortunate that by the time I was 15, my high school band director hooked me up with Tommy Igoe as my drum teacher.
Oh, wow.
So he used to come to my school every Wednesday and teach drum lessons to all the kids in the school band. Oh, wow. So we were really lucky. That was in New Jersey. I grew up in New Jersey.
That's huge.
So, but then part of being a student of Tommy meant that I also had to join the jazz band and the marching band and everything else. So it turned out to be like this kind of full immersion course in drumming. So we studied classical snare drum solos. We studied Buddy Rich big band drumming. We studied, Brazilian music and marching, like drum corps marching rudiments. Mm-hmm. And then, but probably what was even more valuable than that was I used to go to New York a couple times a month and watch him do gigs. So I'd be 15 or 16, and he'd sneak me into a bar or a club or something, and I get to hang out and watch him play a couple sets of music, and I'm like seeing like the real deal of how it worked, not just watching MTV and seeing Van Halen and saying, oh, I want to do that someday.
Yeah.
But actually seeing real drummers load their gear in and load their gear out and sound check and play gigs, and it was fun and such a good learning experience for me. So by the time I did go to University of Miami and start studying down there, I started gigging immediately because I had a little bit of that knowledge and experience already.
Yeah, and were you taking private lessons with Tommy, or was it just through the school?
It was both. He would come in and teach the marching band, and he'd come in and teach the jazz band. But then I also took a private lesson with him once a week also. Yeah. And then if he couldn't teach the private because he had a gig or conflict or something, I'd go study with his dad, who was a famous jazz drummer named Sonny Igoe. Mm-hmm. And he lived about 45 minutes from where my parents lived. So I would drive over there and take a lesson with him, which was such a trip. It was great. So it was, although I say I might have started late, I got a full crash course in drumming in probably my 3 or 4 years in high school, and then my 4 years in Miami. I learned, I guess, in 8 years, I learned probably 16 years worth of material. So
yeah, you definitely got, I wouldn't say lucky, but you definitely had one of the best teachers in the world just kind of fall in your lap there at that time frame.
There's a lot of things that if you look at, anyone could look at their life and say, oh, if I made a left turn here or a right turn here, things would have been different. But there were a lot of crucial things that happened in high school and college that it's just so evident to me that I'm very lucky, very fortunate that certain things happened.
Well, you made a lot of right turns, so I'm happy that all worked out. And then, speaking of your family, did you come from your family have a musical background as well?
Not really. My parents, my dad is Irish, but from New Jersey. My mother's from Korea, but they both loved music. They had a huge vinyl collection, and my parents had music on all the time, and they'd take me to concerts and things like that. Like, I mean, just we saw like Willie Nelson and Roy Orbison, and not like Metallica, but it was, so I had that instilled from as far back as I can remember, a love for music, doo-wop, Motown, jazz, Beatles, all sorts of things like that. And I have my parents have all these audio recordings of me like 2 years old and 3 years old singing with my dad. So,
awesome.
I didn't find out till much later that my dad actually had a doo-wop group when he was younger, and Phil Spector was their producer. So he has these little 45s that were produced by Phil Spector. I thought that was so cool that that happened, and he didn't even think to tell me. But
it was pretty big.
Yeah, but so it's not like they were career musicians that I could have followed or professors in music like some of my friends have. But they taught me the love of music, which I guess is equally as important.
Well, more importantly, they were supportive, and I see that being key in successful musicians like yourself.
Yeah, the supportive thing, that I don't want to say it was begrudging. That they just didn't understand what it meant. I was not primed for a career as a working musician. My parents had it like I was going to be an engineer or a lawyer or a doctor or something like that.
Oh, really?
And then probably by the time I was 17 or 18, I was professing to them as I was applying to colleges. I was saying, man, all I think about is drums. I mean, I obsess about them. I think about beats and coordination and patterns, like as I fall asleep every night. I don't know how I'm going to do well in college if this is all I can think about. Seriously, I feel like I'm going to fail out of my, calculus class if that's what I'm thinking about. So my parents were like, well, what do you want to do then? I'm like, could I go try to study at a conservatory? And they said, well, you try it for a year and see what happens. So that was what happened. I tried it for a year and it went well. Yeah. So then my parents said, all right, you've proved that you like it and that you're willing to try hard. So continue. And then there was a lot of, eating ramen and, doing $25 gigs and, traveling around the country in 15-passenger vans and making no money. And there's a lot of that. And they stood by me through all that. So I have to say that part was super supportive. And now they're thrilled. They love it.
Oh, awesome.
They love music. So.
Yeah, I just see that being a common trend, and like I said, successful musicians, the parents, being supportive and loving about it. So
it helps, yeah.
So, like books that you kind of learned, what were your main books that you would still recommend to this day that you learned through your college and high school years? Especially books like Tommy Agu's. I think it's correct me if I'm wrong. Is book 1 and 2 that I was actually using there for a little bit. Is there any books?
Well, his books were Groove Essentials. He didn't even have those books. When I went to high school, he didn't even write those yet. I actually helped him with those books. Now, let me take that back. I did not help him with those books. I helped proofread the charts in those books. So nice. I do remember when he did those books, he would send me like a stack of charts and say, "Dude, these are going to the presses in a week. See if I'm missing any repeat signs or anything." So then I would go through every chart and because sometimes you need fresh eyes to look at charts. So I'd look at them. I'm like, oh, dude, your DSL coda is in the wrong spot or whatever. Mm-hmm. So but so I remember him doing those books. Before then, we were just studying out of just all the regular books you would, the Chapins and the Ted Reeds and the Stick Controls, and there's a Buddy Rich rudimental book and a lot of sight reading books. He would have a lot of books that had sight reading and sight reading charts. And we did the rudimental ritual, which I guess the lifetime warm up it's called. We did that before he had a video or had it even written out. You just had to learn it by rote. He would just tell you every week, this is this week's, addition to the lifetime warm up. And you just add a new thing every week. And I believe I was the second person to make it all the way to the end. Like he said, there was one other guy who made it to the end and you're the next guy. So now I bet like half the country or half the world knows how to play the whole thing faster than me. But I remember being, 17, trying to work my way through that thing, the lifetime warm up. But yeah, and then college, again, like every teacher had his own set of books. There were some people who liked Chafee books. Some people liked that Gary Chester book. The John Riley books came out around that time, and those were great for bebop. But what I found is most drum teachers just write their own exercises anyway. They write like what they think the student needs or what they think is really essential or important. The last few books I've gone through, I would say I really liked Carter McLean's book and Mark Juliana's book. I went through those two. I'm going through Billy Martin's book right now. But like other professors, I just write my own exercises mostly when I want to work on something. I look at a deficiency in my playing and I say, what would be a great exercise that can help overcome this hurdle? And I just write it out, type it out, like using software, and then I put it on a music stand and I just work on it like every day or, once a week or a month. And then once I got it, I put it in a little 3-ring binder, and that's one of my exercises that I'll share with someone else someday.
So, speaking of that, do you ever plan to publish your own book one day?
I would like to. I didn't think about it at all for a long time. I never thought that I'd ever want to do. I guess this is the thing. I always thought that there were so many good books and so many good instructional videos out there that why bother? But then I've worked with enough people now who are like, dude, I would love this or I'd love that, and they've asked me personally, could you do a video on this, or could you show me this exercise that you do, or teach me this? And I had a drum student named Ben Masters, sweet guy, and he was like, I'd write out exercises for him on just on staff paper. Mm-hmm. He's like, man, you should put these in a book. These are great exercises. I'm like, oh no, they're just for you. I made it for you today. He's like, well, you should make these and sell these. These are great exercises. So I have a collection. I have a chunky 3-ring binder of different kinds of thoughts and practice routines and exercises. So I'll try to organize it into some kind of theme at some point and decide how much of it should be a video, how much of it should be a book, and or both, and I'll release it before I die.
That'd be fantastic. Just a little fun fact before you were speaking about Tommy's book, Groove Essentials. I worked at Guitar Center for many years, and I remember that being my go-to book because the way it was packaged with the DVD and the book. Every time I saw a drum set, that would be an easy add-on because that was such an easy, understandable book. He did a really good job on that book.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
yeah, and that was right on the cutting edge of, I think, MP3s. No one knew what an MP3 was at that time.
Yeah,
and he's like, I'm gonna do this on MP3, and we're like, what is that?
Yeah, and this is before everyone was kind of hip to the YouTube kind of educational side of it, so it was just like a really easy selling point at the point where you had a package there.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah, and that's another thing. Good point. Is like I feel like technology changes so quickly that every time I think about doing something, we're already onto a new format.
Yeah.
There was VHS tapes, like those DCI VHS tapes, and books that have audio CDs, and then there are DVDs, and then there's streaming, and then there's either subscription services or one-time downloads, or I feel like there's so many different ways to do stuff. Mm-hmm. So for the time being, I'm just collecting and outlining material and just doing free stuff on YouTube and teaching private lessons, or seminars.
Oh, and are you currently enrolling new students for your private lessons?
Yeah, sure. I mean, Yeah, it's depending on my schedule. I'm always willing to teach anyone who's interested.
All right, and just on a side note, what would be the best way to reach out for you for that?
Most people reach out to me on my website, which is www.brendanbuckley.com. There's a contact email on that. That's info@brendanbuckley.com.
Oh, nice.
But I try to sift through my Instagram and Facebook messages. There's a lot of them, so some people. Well, I think it's. I want people to contact me, but it becomes a mountain of stuff, and it's hard to read all of them. So sometimes I lose a student in there somewhere. Mm-hmm. I'm like, I could have sworn someone wrote me asking me for a lesson. I can't find it.
Yeah.
Where did I see it? And then I have to go through all these messages, and I find it on my whatever. It's on TikTok or something. There's just so many ways to communicate now, and that's why I think I go in order of like phone, text, and emails first. And then social media is like right under that.
Yeah, it's definitely something to keep up on these days, and I understand in your caliber. Not to shift gears on you, but you've been a long time in Dorsey at DW. How long have you been with them?
I started with them in 2000.
Oh, wow. That's 21 years now.
Yeah, I was prior to that, I endorsed a really great drum company called Fives out of Austin. Fives was the fiberglass company from the 70s. Billy Cobham played them and stuff. Oh, yeah. But then in the 90s, they came out again with these really great maple drums that were Jasper shelled, kind of Gretsch sounding drums. And I played those for maybe 2 years. They were great. And I remember the owners, I think it was Tom and Stacy. They were super great. And then, but then we were playing a lot of gigs with Shakira at the time. She was really blowing up. And it was actually my production manager and my drum tech who were like, you might want to go with a bigger company just because we'll be flying all over the place and we'll be renting a lot. And it's almost serendipitously, Scott Donnell from DW gave his card to my drum tech, like after one of the shows. I think we did the Grammys or the Latin Grammys or something. He's like, oh, I got a card from one of the DW people. I'm like, oh, that must be a sign.
Yeah.
I rent DWs all the time anyway, so let me contact them. So I went up to the factory, did a tour. They show you around. When you see their attention to detail and the craftsmanship, it's hard not to be swayed. They're such a great family and great drum builders, and so I've been with them ever since. And I've been with them ever since they only had one type of drum set called the Collector's Maple. Oh yeah. And now they have every version of grain and wood type and style and configuration and color.
Yeah, and you kind of got on that boat at the right time, right when they were they were big, but they were still up and coming at that point. And owning a DW.
Yeah, I remember when it was like they had Chad Wackerman and Stephen Perkins, and I can't remember.
Fazio.
Yeah, there were only a couple big endorsers that like name brand endorsers, and then they exploded. Yeah,
I think Tommy Lee was their first endorsee, to be honest with you.
Is that so? I didn't know that.
Yeah, it was 1993, I believe.
Mm.
Sorry, I'm geeking out on you there, but yeah, I've been to the factory a couple times myself, and I have multiple DWs, and I do stand by their product, and they're only getting better at this point.
What is your favorite? If you have multiple DWs, what's your favorite one?
Well, to be honest with you, they're all maple collectors. So, but I played, the Purple Heart series recently, and if I were to make an investment, I think the Purple Heart's where I would head.
Yeah, the funny thing is, I should be an expert in everything they make, but they have so many.
Yeah.
That someone will ask me, what do you think of the Purple Heart? And I'll say, I haven't played it yet, but everyone tells me it sounds great. Yeah. I remember when they came out with this cherry kits and the mahogany kits, and I didn't play them. Mm-hmm. So I could ask the company to send me 17 free drum sets, but where would I put them all? So I just have whichever one I used on the most recent tour I did is the only one I have, and I get to know it really well because I try different heads on it, ambassadors, emperors, clear, CS dots or whatever, and I know which heads work good on which drum sets. So I have a jazz kit, I have a classic, I have a stainless steel, I have an acrylic, I have a collector's maple, and I have a PDP.
Oh, nice.
And that kind of covers all the bases in their catalog, but I don't have every little ply configuration that they offer with the poplar and mahogany and cherry and oak and all these other beech. birch. I don't have them all, and people ask me because they want to know which one they should get, and I'll be like, to be honest, I haven't been. They have so much now. I haven't been able to try everything.
Yeah,
I just call up my A&R guy at DW, Stephen Vega, and I ask him, what's the best one and why? And he gives me like his rundown. But it's like when you're talking about sound, it's so subjective too. It's like saying what does purple taste like or something. It's weird to describe drum sounds, people.
Yeah, it's impossible to know at every level what they have now. But I want to discuss the kit that you had on the 2018 video. Is that the stainless steel you're referring to?
That was a stainless steel that I got for that tour. Mm-hmm. And in the 11th hour, right as we're about to go, like we were doing like 2 months of production rehearsals, and then Shakira turned around like 2 days before the first concert and said, your kit would look really cool if it were gold. And I'm like, uh-oh. And she's creative that way, where she gets ideas and they just like, I'm like, oh boy, here we go.
Yeah.
So then I lean over to the drum tech. I'm like, how do we turn this kit gold and not ruin it?
Uh-huh.
He's like, and so he was in charge of getting this company that does vinyl wraps for sports cars, and to get like a gold wrap. And so he took everything off the shelves, like all the lugs and everything, and had it all wrapped in this gold vinyl. And then, so it's a gold looking stainless steel drum set. And then at the end of the tour, I begged them to take it back off again because I like the silver better.
Oh yeah. And then what kind of Remo heads were you running for the majority of the time on that one?
I don't remember. I'd have to look at a video. But
if you were to put a set of Remo heads on there, what would be your go-to?
My go-to is Coated Ambassadors.
Nice.
That's my favorite head. I feel like definitely on the tops, sometimes even on the bottoms. It's a little old school, but I like how it dries things up a little bit. Or clear Ambassadors on the bottoms. Mm-hmm. I like it on snare drums too. I really like Coated Ambassadors on all the batters, and then I actually like a Renaissance Power Stroke 3 is my go-to kick drum head.
Oh, nice.
But not even a clear, or I like the Renaissance for some reason. I discovered that by accident, and it sounds great. But that being said, certain drums sound amazing with clear pinstripes.
Yeah. And
certain drums sound amazing with Emperors, coated or clear Emperors. And every now and then I'll throw a CS dot on a drum just to sound super old school. Mm-hmm. There's a really great drum head called a skin tone, mm-hmm. which it looks a little bit like a fiber skin, but it's even thinner and warmer. That's a beautiful drum head if you're only going to be hitting lightly and you want to get kind of jazzy or folky. It's like a sleeper drum head that everyone should check out. The skin tone, I think it's called. Fantastic.
Now, speaking of tones, I just recently had Jeremy from Lowboy Beaters on the show, and I noticed you were also in Dorsey as well. What type of beaters are you using on those bass drum heads?
Mostly felt. I have the lightweight felt and the regular felt. Mm-hmm. I also have one leather. I have those super puffy ones they have in case I'm playing like a bass drum with no muffling and no hole in it. I'll use the puffy one that looks like a troll.
Yeah.
And then I do have, if you do the Seth Meyers TV show, which I've done a couple times, they give you a free lowboy beater.
Nice.
Also.
Nice.
So as a gift on Friday. So I've done that twice. So I have 2 lowboy beaties from that too. But those are, I guess what we just wood. They're wood, mm-hmm. and that is actually, those are harsh. I've broken more than one bass drum head using those. Those are strong.
Yeah.
So I think that you might need either like one of those flam patches or a double-headed kick drum to use the wood beater, just wood alone. Mm-hmm. But the leather's killer, the felt's killer, and that super puffy troll-looking one is really killer too.
I think he refers to it as the wool one, I believe, is what we were talking about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're all great, and not only do they look cool and they're comfortable, but also the company's great. If you meet them at the NAMM show, and they're all super nice, and mm-hmm. I know. It's just sometimes it's really great to play and support like small drum manufacturers.
Well, Jeremy's a cool dude. I mean, I could talk to that guy for hours, and he just kind of up straight about everything and kind of tells you what you need and how it goes. And it's a good company. Mm-hmm. They're definitely on the rise for sure.
Yeah, I don't know if you ever tried those they have these little triggers too that you can use instead of lug nuts. They have these little like winged nuts that you can put on your bass drum pedals. Oh, really? Have you ever seen those? They're pretty cool. I'm surprised you didn't talk about them.
Oh
But
no.
yeah, imagine this. Imagine this. You know the drum key, and then you loosen your bass drum beater and take it out, and then put another one in, and then turn the drum key back, right?
Yeah.
So, but there's a way where you can put this little like wing nut in there, so you don't need the drum key, so you can quickly hot swap your bass drum beaters, that's a cool invention they have also.
Nice. And then finally, how long you're currently playing Sabian, but how long you been with those guys?
Man, longer than DW. I've been playing Sabian since, I'm gonna guess and say maybe 98.
Okay.
Which is funny because I was thinking about this not too long ago, that I started playing Sabian because of two guys who are no longer Sabian endorsers, but a drummer friend of mine named Jason Sutter and my college professor, Keith Aleo, were both big Sabian lovers and Sabian proponents. And they kind of brought me into the family, and I met a guy named Bobby Booz at the time, who was the A&R guy in the West Coast. And yeah, I've been with Sabian, I would say probably since 98. And yeah, and now for years now, my A&R guy has been a guy named Christian Stanky, and he is great. He knows so much about cymbals. He knows a lot about what I do. So sometimes I'll go to his office and he goes, I have a cymbal that I think you would like, or I have a cymbal that I think would be good for this gig, because he knows I do different kinds of gigs. So he's like, maybe this one would be good for the Shakira gig, or this one would be good for that singer-songwriter you're playing with, or this one would be good for your studio. So it's good to have someone who actually knows your taste. And I mean, there's a lot of Sabian guys out there. So imagine like he knows, Chad Smith's taste and he knows mine. They're probably totally different. But
yeah, that's and I noticed you use a lot of stacks. Was that something that you kind of just done from experimenting? Because I noticed you kind of utilize like the little stacks throughout the kit.
Yeah, I mean, stacks are all the rage now.
Yeah,
I mean, like you're nobody unless you have like 16 cymbals piled on top of one another, just like a Dagwood sandwich. But
yeah,
but I feel like I've been doing that forever. I mean, it's not like I invented it, but if you see old videos of Terry Bozzio, he's using stacks. Yeah. I mean, and I was a Terry Bozzio freak back in the day. Yeah. I mean, he had those China cymbals with the crashes inside, so the Chinas were really dry.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
So I mean, you can see old videos of Gad playing stacks. So it's not new. And there's a lot of different ways to do it. I think it's more just thinking about the tones of your drums and cymbals, and you ask yourself, do I want them to be low or high, long or short? And when you're tuning your drums or picking cymbals, you're just asking yourself those questions. Do I want the sounds to be low? Do I want them to be really high? Do I want them to be long, or do I want them to be short? And the stacks offer you the chance to have super short cymbal sounds. And if you want, I think it's bizarre when guys use stacks, but they crash on them like they're supposed to be crash cymbals. Like, dude, you're probably putting the cart in front of the horse there or something. But but stacks, if you want short, dry sounds, you can't beat it. That's the best way to do it. So yeah, or use a broken cymbal too. I mean, broken cymbals are actually quite cool to use if you have a good one.
Yeah,
because that'll give you this weird, dead, choked sort of sound.
Yeah. And this is probably a silly question, but I noticed you play with the ride, if you can remember. It looks like it has a stack on the bell. Is that an actual stack, or was that like a prototype that was made for you?
No, I did that. So I will, for any tour that I do, I look at every setup like a special setup for this tour. So I think that might have been either the Tegan and Sara or the Farrell tour. I think it was the Tegan and Sara tour you're talking about. And there was not a single ride cymbal bell note on any song in their set list. So I'm like, well, I don't know why I would need a bell, but maybe I could put something else there that might be cool. So then I started just messing around. I threw a splash that fit perfectly over the bell. It wasn't like too big or too small. It fit perfectly. So then it made the ride cymbal sound like a rivet cymbal.
Nice.
Just the way it vibrated. I'm like, oh, it's like having a rivet cymbal without rivets in it. So I'm like, I'll just leave it like that for now. And it wound up working great. And I got a ton of questions about that. Like, who makes that? Or what do you call that model? I'm like, it's just a ride cymbal with a splash cymbal over the bell. But when you play it, it sounds like a kind of like a dry cymbal with rivets. And I just love the sound. It also helped because, I mean, again, like I say, you try to come up with the cymbal sounds that work for that gig. And that gig, I was set up directly behind Tegan. So she was sometimes 2 feet or 4 feet in front of me with her microphone. So I didn't want a bunch of super loud, super ringy cymbals that were in her vocal mic all night long. Mm-hmm. So I tried to come up with cymbals that sounded very good, but that were very dark, thin, and dry. And that helped in that department also.
And visually it looks like that's the way the cymbal's supposed to be. So you did a really good job at making it blend really well there. But I also want to bring up Tegan and Sara. How long were you playing with them, and how many studio projects did you do with them?
Well, I only did one tour with them, and that tour was 2016, 2017. So I guess it was about 2 years. And as far as studio projects, we did a lot of in-studio recordings, like live in-studio recordings. Uh-huh. But I'm not on any of their records that I think of. Oh. Just things like, hey, we're doing a song for this event, or we're doing a song for this event, and I would go do it with them. But so that's that. But I love they're super fantastic. I mean, what a great group of people to work with.
Nice. And I kind of want to talk what's in the future with you. Before I let you go here, I know everything's kind of obviously due to the pandemic, everything's kind of on hold. But is there any future projects you're excited for that you can mention besides working with Perry right now?
Future projects, let's see. I mean, I can only hope that everything that got canceled last year is still on the books. I was supposed to do Coachella with this artist named Nati Peluso from Argentina. I was going to do a European tour with a Taiwanese artist named Jeff Chang, and we were going to do like Royal Albert Hall in England and all these other things that all got postponed. And we were going to do a South American tour, Perry Farrell. I hope that happens.
Oh, yeah.
But in the future, I mean, there's always talk of Shakira going back out on the road again, but I'm not in charge of that. So whenever everyone asks me, when are you going back out on the road? Yeah. It's not up to me.
Yeah.
But I stay in touch with her, and we talk about making music all the time, so I hope it happens soon. So other than that, I hope that I get to keep on doing some drummer plus drummer collaborations, and maybe I can do a live version of that starting soon. Mm-hmm. And I hope to start putting out a lot more educational products and also original recordings and productions for other people. I like making music, recording music, producing music, writing music, and I guess I have no excuse to procrastinate if we're in a quarantine. So I hope I can keep on being productive somehow. And I guess that's the thing. I don't have specific things, but I just want to keep moving forward, and that makes me happy.
Yeah, and I mean this as a big compliment. You're definitely going to have some scheduling conflicts when everything opens up. I definitely see that in your future here.
Yeah, I have a couple friends. A couple friends of mine. We joke about that. Like sometimes we'll call each other and say, "Oh man, I got a problem. I have to decide between this gig and this gig." And I'm like, "Well, that doesn't sound like a problem. That sounds like a good situation to be in."
Yeah.
So scheduling conflicts are a headache, but it also means that you're doing something right.
Yeah, and once again, I mean that as a huge compliment. I definitely see that being a good thing and a bad thing for you coming up. And I would say probably about 2022, I think everything's going to be full force again.
Yeah, well, I just today got my first COVID vaccination. So
right on.
Let's hope that that's a step in the right direction.
All right, and then I kind of want to plug your channels before you. Obviously, you have a successful YouTube channel, and then you can find that just under Brendan Buckley. And then you said for lessons to reach out to you on the multiple social media platforms. And where's the best place to check out the Drummer Plus Drummer posts? Just Instagram?
They're you know what? They're everywhere. I started it has its own Instagram page, but it's also on my Instagram page, Brendan Buckley, and there's also a Drummer Plus Drummer because I don't know if everyone wants to sift through all my stupid jokes in photography just to see a drum duet. So I open up a second page just for people that want to watch drum duet videos.
Oh, yeah.
But it's also on YouTube, and it's also on Facebook. And what's interesting is a little insider thing is they're slightly different depending on where you go sometimes. Mm-hmm. I make them a little bit longer, a little bit shorter, so you have to kind of check them all out if you want to get the full dose.
Well, like I said, I'm wholeheartedly enjoying them, so please keep doing them. I can't wait to see them live.
Wow. Well, that's really nice. I mean, it's just a hobby that I'm doing with friends, and I'm glad I get such a good response from that. And I just don't want to let anyone down. I hope people are still enjoying it.
Yeah, we are.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, Brendan, I really want to thank you for coming on the show. It'd be great. I mean, there's probably another 3 or 4 hours I could have asked you your questions, but I'm not going to do that to you. But you're a busy guy, and it would be great to have you on in the near future, probably when everything opens up to see what's going on. But Brendan, I just got to say thank you for coming on.
Yeah, it's not a problem at all. Total pleasure. I wish you a lot of luck with your show, and a lot of luck to all your listeners out there and whatever they're working on. And yeah, I wouldn't mind doing it again soon.
All right. Well, we'll talk soon, Brendan. And thanks to you guys for all listening in. As always, you can find us on Apple and Spotify and, of course, YouTube. You guys all have a good day and a good night. Thank you.